All right, good afternoon, everybody. Hi. I'm Mothershaw from the Open Identity Exchange.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Haine, also from the Open Identity Exchange and the OpenID Foundation.
Brilliant. And we're here to talk to you today about what a smart wallet is and how it might be implemented. So I'm going to kick off by explaining what's a smart wallet. We've only got a short time, and we've got a lot packed into this presentation, so we're going to pretty much race through it because we want to get through to enable you to get some questions in. So that's us. We've introduced ourselves. Let's race past that. So we're going to look at the requirements for a smart wallet. We're going to look at its required components, and then we're going to talk about standards in this area and, importantly, gaps, of which there are quite a few. I'm going to talk about the smart wallet bit, what it is. Mark's going to talk about the components and gaps. So let's dive in. So what's the smart wallet? So in my diagrams, I always use these diagrams, this little box is my smart wallet. Could be on a phone, could be in the cloud, could be a personal data store. So I'm not intimating any kind of implementation here through the wallet. I'm talking about the process and the policy around it. What these wallets need to do is enable the user to gather, manage, present credentials, all kinds of different credentials. Specifically, their identity is what we at OAX are about, and also eligibility. So identity is this is me, eligibility, I can get on this plane, I can buy this drink. So what it's doing is providing proofs, different forms of proofs for different purposes. And they may then reside in the wallet as a reusable proof. Often they're point in time because they only really last a short while because they're quite complex proofs with lots of different data sources behind them, such as a level of assurance or am I COVID safe? Well, I might be COVID safe today, but tomorrow I might not be. Whereas, unfortunately for me, I'm always over 18. I'm not getting any younger. And this is controlled by the user. And that's really key to our view of wallets. They are managed and controlled by the user, and they then use them to present these credentials and proofs to different forms of acceptors, airlines, retailers, banks, any form of relying party who might wish to get information from the user and who the user might wish to access services from. So, a couple of examples of how this, before I go on. Underpinning all this, and this is really important, is a trust framework. So this is what defines the rules that the wallet is operating in, that the issuers of the credentials to the wallet operate in, that the relying party is operating in. And it's often at a national level, it could be at a sector level, it could be an agreement between a set of relying parties and a set of wallet providers. But it's really important that this all is underpinned by a set of rules, and that's what makes the ID safe, secure, and consistent when it comes from lots of different providers. So if I rock up with my wallet to try and buy a drink, in the UK, they want to know, am I over 18? So it's an exchange of information. Can I buy a drink? Well, are you over 18? My wallet needs to work that out for me. I know I'm over 18. I know I've got a passport in my wallet. There's a whole set of rules, and this is the important bit to introduce here. There's a whole set of rules that are going to come over with that request that say, well, this is how I want you to formulate the person is over 18. I need that proof to come from a government document that was issued in this way to the user, that was proofed in this way, that is bound to the user with these kind of authenticators, i.e. a face, so I know it's them presenting it, not a password that they've given them to present it. So those rules are really important and complex, even for something like over 18. And when the wallet or its agent has formulated the answer to those rules, it can simply supply, yes, this person's over 18. And then I can do this in lots of different circumstances. This exchange between the parties, with a bank, can I access your services? Well, are you proofed sufficiently to access my service? Here's my rules for proofing. These are really complex rules now. There's lots of different options of how I prove who I am from a KYC perspective. The wallet or its agent needs to help the user through that process and enable them to determine, in this case, a level of assurance. This has been asked for by the financial institution. It's a local policy prescribed by a trust framework. It's a concept, an assurance concept. The wallet needs to understand that. And then it can provide the yes, it is who you are. And these rules are coming at wallets from all over the place. And one of the things we're working at is how does this work when I move from place to place? When I come here from the UK to the US, my wallet should still work in the same way as my phone does today and my bank cards do. I don't want to get another wallet here in the US to do proving things in the US. I might if I move here, but while I'm visiting and doing business, I want my wallet to work. And these rules are going to fly from all directions. The relying party's got its own view on the rules. Things, different credentials it would accept from its risk-based approach. Liability it might want if you're going to provide me with the wallet. The trust framework has set some overarching rules under which all this must operate. The credential issuer might have put rules on its credential. Well, yes, you can use this, but you can't use it to prove you're over 18 to go in a liquor store because ethically I don't want you to do that with my credential. And then the user might have their own rules. Every time I walk into a liquor store, I'm fine with the camera filming me and telling the operative I'm over 18 because I don't want to go through the theatre of having to prove who I am each time. So these rules need to be understood and interpreted by the wallet. So we're trying to create an open policy rules exchange framework that will enable all these parties to express and consume policy rules and assurance rules between themselves. And the wallet sits at the centre of that. And the reason we call it smart is it's got to understand and interpret these rules, layer them in. Whose rules take precedence in this complex set of questions I'm trying to answer, just to say the person's over 18, or provide a more complex level of assurance. And we're working with trust frameworks around the globe on an analysis of their different characteristics. So I've listed them here. We've done the UK, US, EU. The other 5 are in progress and will be done in a month or so. At that point, we will complete our analysis on the Open Policy Rules Exchange Framework, OPREF. And what this does is so far divide out into broadly 2 areas. Over on the side, is it? Over on the that side, general policy rules, things like liability, data protection. Steve, in the previous presentation, was talking about the metadata. This is the communication of the metadata about the framework, the metadata about the credential itself that enables the consuming party to understand the policy. And then the special bit for identity is credentials. Which ones do I accept? We've identified 5 golden credentials: national ID cards, passports, bank accounts, driving licenses and telcos. Appear, not all of them, but they appear in trust frameworks around the globe as trusted credentials. So we think these are the golden credentials or the currency of identity. These are the things that will let us trade in our identity and prove it around the world, from which levels of assurance the assurance policy can be derived. So we're creating a methodology that enables us to map credentials to assurance policies, to combine them, score them, rank them, and spit out a level of assurance. And so far, on the 3 frameworks we've analysed, which are pretty diverse, this methodology works. We hope it works for the other 5, and we think that we've cracked something that then enables levels of assurance to be reformulated, not aligned, because they are different for different reasons. Different policies in different countries, different risk appetites, different governmental attitudes mean they are going to be inherently different rules. We reformulate the rules in the local area based on the metadata we receive in the framework. So that's where we've got to, and that's really exciting. Over the summer, we'll be publishing more detail on what we've done here as we go into September. At that point, I'll hand over to Mark to talk about, well, that's great, but how does this actually implement and help in the real world?
Yeah, so great. Loads of amazing and interesting concepts there, which are going to be important going forward. But I wanted to kind of bring it back to something a bit more tangible. So I think we might generally have had experience of COVID-safe credentials. Depending on where you're from, that would take the form of 1 or more credentials. And I think we know there were many sets of rules depending what you were trying to do with that credential. I could immediately think of conferences, restaurants, and sports events as the sorts of things that needed me to present a credential in some way. But the rules were basically all different. And as a person, I had to go and read the rules and understand them and work out what I had to present where and when. effectively making appropriate decisions before traveling to each of these events about what I was going to be required to do. So quite a lot of thinking required. Hang on, that was funny. Just effectively for one type of credential. So the question I have in my mind is what's going to happen when we have many sorts of credentials to handle. A little illustrative use case here. So Neha, in this story, is the policy manager at the Depop fan site. She wants to be sure that if the website user is resident in Europe and that the website user is, if they're resident in Europe, they are over 13. She really doesn't want her employer to have to handle date of birth or age. She wants a nice Boolean, as Nick was illustrating earlier, to just confirm over 13 and resident in Europe. So I've confirmed there as well, if the policy isn't met, Neha doesn't want her employer to get any information about the individual in question. She also wants to be sure the information is from a trusted issuer and that the end user is appropriately authenticated. Helpfully, her employer provides a document of terms and conditions for end users to read so that they can understand what's needed. Mary is the end user in this case. She wants to access the Depop site. She's a big fan of the authors. She's got 15 credentials in her wallet. She doesn't really want to overshare her data, but it's not really that obvious which of the credentials she has is going to be able to meet the requirements of the website. And the T's and C's are pretty boring. So the challenge is, do we really want to have Mary doing what we all did with our COVID-safe credential and work it out for herself, which one's the best fit, or do we want to have some sort of help? It's a multi-party system and potentially, as some of the use cases Nick was illustrating, potentially international multi-party system, so standards are going to be really critical in this. There's a load of complex relying party requirements. As Nick was saying, interoperability is going to be quite challenging, and it's not just interoperability at a protocol layer, but also at a data layer. We need to take into account privacy requirements from the user perspective, data minimization from the relying party perspective to be compliant with data processing rules locally, and we want to be able to present meaningful consent to the end user about what is being shared. These are all quite significant challenges. On the assumption for now that we're using verifiable credentials, there's Mary, she's got a wallet. Now, she's been issued some credentials by her issuer of choice or government department or whatever it was. Along with those credentials came some context and some rules about how those credentials may be used. Some of those rules and context may have come from the trust framework that the issuer operates within, so the rules environment. There's the verifier over there, and Neha's setting the rules for her employer at the verifier end. When the verifier is communicating with the wallet, some rules and some contexts need to be passed to the wallet. And some of those rules may have come from a different trust framework that governs the behavior of the verifier in this case. I didn't include it because there may also be a third trust framework governing what the wallet provider gets up to here as well, but there was only so much space on the slide. And finally, there may be an appropriate wallet an appropriate credential that the wallet can present to the verifier to get access to the Depop website. Oh, and by the way, I didn't even think about mentioning more than one wallet. So I think there's a bunch of technical components that we may need here, and this is where it veers off into Mark's imagination. But I think there's some merit in this, and I really want to promote the conversation about this. I do have a view that this is a number of years out. It's maybe a bit further than some of the wallet architectures currently are. So there's a data definition requirement, so things about how to express context in an interoperable way across multiple jurisdictions, a way to express rules and pass them from one party to another, and then there's the credential format argument going on in other environments as well, but that needs to be taken into account too. And then from a functional perspective, we need to be able to enable data minimization, so returning as little as possible to the verifier for all sorts of good reasons. We might even want to say, well, we're not returning anything if Mary is indeed under 13 and lives in Europe. And because the rules are coming in from multiple places, there needs to be some clever logic to take rules from multiple sources and combine them in a deterministic fashion. That is not a trivial problem. So effectively the same set that I've just talked about, but in a diagrammatic form. There's a landscape of standards that kind of overlay on this. I wanted to just share my view of this. So in the context expression space, there's work going on about holder assertions. So these are metadata about wallets. Clearly there's the VC 1.1 data model is an important one expressing some of the contextual information. From a data minimization perspective, both SDJOT and ZKPs have something to say in that area. In the conditional return space, SDJOT, ZKPs, and the ISO 18013 standards apply. In terms of expressing the rules from the verifier to the wallet, the diff presentation exchange work and some of the ISO 18013 standards fit that. But I couldn't find anything that fitted into the combining logic space here. It's also relevant, and I had previously additional slides that we decided to cut out for timeliness reasons to say that the same sort of problems exist in the OpenID Connect domain, so federation. We've got a different set of standards there. Interestingly, one of them's starting to cross over. I'll come to that in a moment, but we've got in the context expression capability, there's the OpenID provider metadata stuff. There's elements of OpenID core that bleed over into data minimization, conditional return, and rules expression, specifically the claims request parameter. And there's a new piece of work that's going on in one of the OIDF working groups called the Advanced Syntax for Claims. It's not ready yet, it's a work in progress. And in terms of other works in progress, the OpenID Connect for Identity Assurance, which is the one that's crossing over between OIDC and VC there, is delivering a richer schema for all of the identity assurance stuff that Nick was referring to earlier in the presentation. But again, not an obvious standard anywhere there, or even terribly obvious implementation in a non-standardized way that addresses the combining logic part of the problem space here that I could identify. So, I think you might have gathered that I haven't got all the answers, and that means I want your help. Come and join us, both at OIX if you're more into the policy stuff, or the OpenID Foundation if you're more into the technical stuff. Help us fill in the gaps. Help me fill in my understanding where there are gaps there too. If I've missed something, please come and tell me. And I think part of this falls into a user experience domain as well. At the end of the day, that making it easy for Mary to get access to the website's a UX thing, not a security or interoperability thing per se. We've been talking about how we might put together a prototype focusing on the UX in the next year or so, or 6 months perhaps. We don't really know what that looks like yet, but if you're interested in investigating that, we'd be super interested to hear from you. So in the summary, these real-world wallet journeys are complex, and perhaps more complex than the tools we have today are ready for. I think there's more components out there needed than are currently present if we're going to do the level of fidelity that we've been talking about. And there are some standards in this space, but there are gaps, and it may be appropriate to extend some of the standards that exist or consider building new ones to fill in the gaps. Thank you very much. And how are we for time?
Yeah.
About bang on.
Yeah. We got 5 minutes for questions if there are any questions. I was interested. The presentation before was talking about Kim Cameron quote that was talking about we need to get all of this right for relying parties, and if we don't, it doesn't work. I'd like to add to that quote that we need to get this right for relying parties and end users. It's got to be right for both parties. If it's all relying party-centric, then it works for them and it delivers data in the way they want. It's going to be clunky for the user. What we're describing here is a process that needs to take into account the needs of both and all the rules around them, but at the heart needs to then step the user through it in an understandable process, hiding the detail from the user, but exposing it where it's important, and trying to hide anything from the user that's important that they need to know.
So 4 minutes for questions then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Very good presentation. Congratulations. In that components landscape, you guys are planning to, well, where could I use an SSI framework in that landscape? Like, I don't know, something like the OpenID or something, in order to store those information about documents in the wallet.
So that upper section where it says VC is intended to imply verifiable credentials. So I think that would be a wallet-based architecture.
Okay.
So that top half of the diagram.
Okay.
So, you have to think about the wallet, right? The wallet is kind of like local to maybe your device, and you onboard verifiable credentials on that device. It's really exciting to see this work, but the thing that concerns me more from a mass scale adoption is like what happens. How do you think about recoverability of the credentials if the wallet is kind of like lost and so on and so forth?
I think that's not a domain that Nick or I are expert in.
I
can point in the direction of some people who are.
I can give you a view.
Yeah, okay.
A policy view, if you like. The policy view is that the wallet should not be bound and constrained to the device. The device is useful. It contains keys that you can use for authenticators and keys that you use to unlock everything. But our view at OAX is that shouldn't be bound to one device. We need to move away from device-centric thinking on that and make sure that the user can use those across multiple devices seamlessly. That implies we need some kind of store that is accessible across the multiple devices. Apple do that. Lots of my Apple stuff works on all my Apple devices, almost like magic, and it comes up with little, do you want to move that password from there to there? So
it's possible.
It's possible.
But it's not standardized.
And they're proprietary.
Yeah.
We need that to happen in a standardized way, and we need the wallet to be essentially in the cloud but secure. But I'm not technical, so I don't have to answer how you do that, but that's where I think we need to get to. Okay.
Any other questions? Right, well, thanks very much for sticking with us on that whistle-stop brain dump.
Yeah.
You know where to find us.
Yeah. Any questions, come and give us a chat. Thank you.